this is something else that a lot of people are talking about here. Not in a good way. So we're seeing people starting to kind of set this train back on the tracks here and get to kind of the heart of the issue for some people who are hearing this story. So yesterday during our show, toward the end of the show, we were actually listening in on a live Q&A. Reporters were talking with Cheryl Reeve. She's the head coach of the Minnesota Lynx. At the end of this kind of little back and forth Q&A, she actually rounded up the reporters and she brought something up with them. She had some things that she wanted to say about this recent trend of throwing sex toys onto the court at WNBA games. So we wanted to clip just a little piece of what she had to say. Here it is.
It's been going on for centuries. The sexualization of women. This is the latest version of that. And it's not funny. And it should not be the butt of jokes on any radio shows or in print or in any comments. The sexualization of women is what's used to hold women down. And this is no different. This is just its latest form.
So a little bit more we are learning today. Apparently a crypto meme coin group says that they are actually the ones behind this. They did a sort of an anonymous interview with ESPN, but gave their name. Sure enough, their company value has gone up now today. But now we're seeing this other side, Coach Reeve, several others who are saying that this actually cuts way deeper than just a funny viral prank or a brand prank. And then, if you remember, we saw something just a couple of weeks ago with that Sydney Sweeney jeans ad for American Eagle. Brand makes a move, brand gets attention, and sometimes brand doesn't see the backlash coming. So we wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this. So joining me now is Dr. Seth Ketron. He teaches marketing, brand management, and consumer behavior at the University of St. Thomas. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so, okay, let's, a lot to unpack here. Let's start with this Memecoin company. They say they were just trying to build their brand, just trying to make money, period. Do you think that they even imagined that it would spark this kind of backlash and this kind of emotion?
Generally speaking, I don't know a whole lot about this particular company, but I would have to imagine, I can't imagine anyone thinking that, oh, I'm just going to go to a basketball game or any sporting event or any public place and throw sex toys out and not think that there's going to be some kind of backlash or reaction to that. And it seems to be, on their part, just a means of getting their name out there and getting people to talk about them. And a lot of these kind of shocking actions that, brands or companies may do, which have been going on for decades, really it's just designed to get people talking about them and to get attention on the brand. Yeah. And if that was their goal, they've definitely accomplished it.
Yeah. So given modern times now, the age that we live in, is that old adage still true that there's no such thing as bad publicity, or has that, do you think, changed?
Well, it depends on how you define good and bad publicity, right? So if, you think about, we want to be relevant. We want people to talk about us. We want to go viral. We don't really care if we annoy people or anger people or hurt people or whatever the case may be. We just want people to talk about us. And, these kinds of things generally work for that purpose. Now, as far as long-term outcomes, what's going to happen to sales, what's going to happen to business, what's going to happen, different, segments of the market. Some people look at, let's say, the Sydney Sweeney ad, or this particular instance with the crypto brand. Some people are going to look at that and say, people are overreacting. I don't really understand the big deal. Some people look at it and say, no, this was absolutely a thinly veiled attempt to promote eugenics. And some people say, well, maybe they were just being tone deaf. They didn't understand. With a brand like American Eagle that's been around for a very long time, they're not new at this. They're not new at advertising. They're not new at any of this. So I can't imagine it was a matter of they didn't know any better. I think it was a matter of they want to be relevant, right? They want to get their name out there and for people to talk about them. And again, they definitely accomplished that. Now their stock price has of course gone up, but the effects on sales is probably going to take a little bit longer for us to see, what happens in the next quarter. And, how does social media sentiment continue to unfold? Are there going to be people that continue to support AE and people that continue to cry out against the campaign? And what does the balance of this, look like percentage-wise in the market? That remains to be seen.
Yeah. It reminds me too of when the DEI was in the headlines a few months back, and Target said we're taking away these goals and these initiatives around DEI, and then I think it was Costco at the same time said we're gonna lean into that. And you really saw, and I don't know if it's just anecdotally on social media that we're seeing people get tribal and just really dig in. What's the reality? Is it really affecting the way we spend our money, or is it a smaller but sort of vocal group that is drawing those lines?
I would say in general, it's probably going to be a smaller group that would make changes to their consumption and buying habits over the long term. A lot of people do have initial emotional reactions to these sorts of things, and you'll see people say, well, I'm never buying this brand again, or I'm never shopping here again. And, 2 or 3 weeks later, they're right back at it, because at the end of the day, what a company or a brand stands for might not be the most important thing to some consumers. It might be, is this store the closest to me? Do they have what I like to buy? Do I like their prices? There's all kinds of different attributes they might be looking for. I will say in my own research and what we've seen in the literature on political ideology, the reactions to these kinds of things tend to be stronger more among liberal consumers than conservative consumers. But every brand's different, right? We look at Target, and for me, it was a very interesting decision to pull back on DEI, because that was part of Target's core brand identity. It was something they really stood for. It's something that they promoted in their assortments for years. And suddenly to have that pulled back, it's a question of, okay, well, who are you as a brand then? This is what you told us you stood for, and now you've changed. So it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. With Costco and the shareholders voting to keep DEI, a lot of those decisions are just a matter of who is our customer base, and for a lot of companies, it's the bottom line. Like, what is the financial impact going to be? And if a company makes a decision that's going to hurt their bottom line, then that's going to be a problem. So a lot of these decisions, that's going to weigh in on what they decide to do.
Yeah. What a fascinating time to teach what you're teaching right now, because you just can dig into these. Each instance maybe has the same theme, but is so different based on, like you talked about, Target and their brand identity and how that fits into it, or historically. I'm curious, is this kind of thing, as you look at it almost historically, is it cyclical? I feel like right now, especially maybe in the last 5-6 years or so, socially, we've become maybe even more conscious. We've become more interested in our shopping our values as opposed to our dollars. Is that something that's kind of hitting right now and that we see fading away and maybe come back, or like kind of over the course of history in marketing and consumerism, where are we falling right now?
So, as a field, marketing is relatively young, compared to other fields like biology that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, the things that we've seen unfolding over the history of consumption is, a lot of times it was how much money did I have and who had the best thing or the cheapest thing. And, it's evolved into, in the 80s and 90s, relationship marketing, and then, the digital revolution and everything that's changed with social media. And, among the millennial generations, so people my age, and then Gen Z, and then even going into Gen Alpha, there's a lot more focus on buying brands based on values. The market has become saturated with so many different options that now, the cheapest isn't necessarily as relevant anymore as, I don't want to give my money to an organization that's going to fund things that I don't agree with, or if this company has engaged in this practice I find horrible, then if I'm buying from them, then I become complicit. So that's kind of a mindset among a lot of consumers in younger generations. As for whether that's going to stick around, it seems to be fairly persistent in, the younger generations now that have had spending power for a while. But, in 10 or 20 years' time, if there's, let's say a major economic crisis or something changes to where we all have to care most about how much we can get for our dollar and that's it, then that might change. But for right now, it's looking like, values-based, purchasing and placing value on what companies stand for and what we stand for personally, and what brands align with who am I as a person is a pretty strong driver still.
It's just such an interesting, because it affects all of us. We're all consumers in one way or another. So really interesting stuff. Dr. Ketron, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some more insight into this. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.